Welcome, Christa Carr, Communications Director of the Glass House. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to talk a lot about the Glass House as we get into our interview, but let's talk about the beginning, a little bit about your early life and your family.
Yes, so actually it started off here in Connecticut. I was born at the Stanford Hospital. My parents were living in Rye, and I was their first child. At around age three, they moved to Madrid, Spain for he worked for an American multinational company.
And how many are in your family?
So in total, we're five. I'm the eldest. I have two younger brothers.
Tell me about the moving around. You've been to a lot of countries. By the age of 11, you were speaking 3 languages.
Yes, it was a bit chaotic. It was very interesting. I was moved from Spain to then the Cotswolds and the English countryside,
Wow.
which was beautiful. And then after that, we moved to San Francisco. So we had quite a variety of different landscapes and different cultures that I experienced very early on.
You had influence by your 4 grandparents.
Yes.
They are fascinating people. Can you tell me a little bit about each one of them?
Yes, I was lucky to have very attentive grandparents who were very much involved in my life as long as they could. My American grandmother she was from Chicago, and she was the daughter of a Swedish-American immigrant who came through Ellis Island on a boat. And so she had that experience and excitement about really focusing on education. She graduated from Northwestern University in 1933 and studied chemistry, which I believe was quite unusual at the time. And then met my grandfather, who was a scientist studying nuclear science at the University of Chicago. And he ended up being an inventor and a pioneering scientist in food irradiation.
Wow, fantastic. How about the other side of the family? You had some interesting summers in Provence, I believe?
Yes, I had a really wonderful French grandmother in Provence who created this beautiful world for us when we would visit, in her garden filled with lavender and roses and mimosa. And she was very nurturing and really encouraged me to carry on being independent as I was going through education and then working. And my French grandfather, who I didn't really know that well, he also had an exciting life during the war. He worked for CETA, which was the French national tobacco company, and through those running those factories, he saved a lot of lives. I think sending packages of cigarettes to people and to his friends who were, in prison and things like that. But he then went on to run the CETA in Paris.
So you were living in San Francisco. Is that where you graduated from high school?
Yes, absolutely. So I went through the high school in San Francisco, which was really, really fun, and big focus was on sports. I was a synchronized swimmer, and my team, they were the Aquanauts, so they went on to go to the Olympics in Barcelona several years later.
Wow.
I was on that team, on the early team, but I now went on to college, so I did not go to the Olympics. But it was very exciting to be a part of this new sport in the Olympics.
And where did you go to college?
I went to Boston College. So first, I did study soil science for 1 year at Cal Poly. I thought I'd be a scientist, and I realized how much real patience and dedication it takes to be a scientist and to be in lab all the time. And it wasn't really what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like it used my skills. So I switched. I first went to Paris, as one does, to study art. And I did a year at the Sorbonne, and then I transferred to Boston College, and then I really found what I loved, which was international relations and political science.
Christa, after Boston College, what was next?
So I was planning to go to law school, and so I was studying for the LSAT. I worked as a paralegal, and I just was not into it at all. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't feel passionate about it, and I had a friend of mine who said, "Why don't you apply to Christie's or Sotheby's?" And it just never occurred to me that you could actually work in the arts. I don't know why, but I just never thought that. I thought it would be too much fun. Like, how could that be a career? So I actually went and I called both of them and to see, what they might have, maybe an internship. And Christie's called me back, and that was the beginning. I had a place in their wine department, and I started the first day. I walked through the auction house, and there was a Nureyev sale, which was absolutely stunning. And this whole world opened up to me, and I just realized that this is what I always loved. I always loved culture, and I always wanted to work in this world.
So that was really the beginning that led you to your role at the Glass House.
Yes.
Tell me the steps that got you to the Glass House and how you got the job.
Oh, yes. So, well, after that, I ended up going to London to study art history and get a master's in art history. I was a graduate trainee in the Christie's program, which was a fantastic program where they put me through several departments, and I really ended up working closely with the specialists. After working at Christie's, I went on to be a junior specialist there, and then worked for the Rothschild family in London, where they were basically running the Somerset House as chairman, and there were a few other National Trust sites like Waddesdon Manor and the Butrint Foundation, which is an archaeological site. So this then put me in a position to learn about what it was like to be a patron of the arts, and my first taste of preservation.
Wow, that sounds so interesting. So you were over in Europe for a little while.
Yes.
And decided to move back to the United States. When did you move to New Canaan?
So I then worked for Benedict Taschen, who was a collector, who I met while I was at Christie's. And then I worked in art publishing in London for a while, and I met my husband, who's English, and then he got transferred over here, which is why we ended up back in this area, because my parents were living in Wilton, and I wanted to live in a town nearby, and I always loved New Canaan, and I thought it was the most quaint and beautiful town with the downtown Elm Street where you could stroll, and it had such a unique history with the colonial past as well as the mix of the mid-century modern, which is just unbelievable.
So you knew about the Glass House when you were buying and moving to New Canaan?
Yes, I did. We knew about it. I knew about it before. I actually started working at Taschen on big architectural books. So I worked closely with some architects, like promoting their books. So we had a lot of experience, with learning about architecture and having that in as a cultural subject that I worked in. I worked with Tadao Ando. We did something with Rem Koolhaas and a few other really interesting architects. So I was aware of the Glass House. I had not visited the Glass House yet.
So you were living in New Canaan, and the
Yes.
opportunity to work at the Glass House came about. Tell me,
Yes.
what happened?
Well, I had a wonderful meeting with Christy McClear, who was the inaugural director at the time, and so she was very familiar with Taschen, and I spoke to her about what I had done before, and I thought it was just the most amazing place to work here. And so she hired me to run a press campaign for an event. It was Modern Views, and it was a big fundraiser for the Brick House. And I started off like that, and then slowly took on more projects. I was having two other kids during this time, or one in 2010 and then another one a few years later. So I was kind of in the thick of things like that, but it was really a wonderful place to work, and I just took on more and more work, basically.
Describe for me the Glass House, the setup. If I'm coming to New Canaan for the first time and I've heard about going to the Glass House, what am I experiencing?
So when you arrive at the Glass House, we first meet at the visitor center in town, and then give you a little bit of a background on what you're going to experience, and then take you there. When you arrive, there are 49 acres, so a lot of people are surprised by the landscape and how much that's a part of the whole experience. And then you also notice all the other buildings and 14 structures. So there's the main gate, and you go in, and there's the another building, Da Monsta, and you go down this driveway, and you see this spectacular view with architecture punctuating the landscape. So it's a really fascinating place, not just for the Glass House itself, which is so beautiful, but the other architectural objects. And then you go into the actual other buildings. There's a painting gallery with 20th century art that's museum level. It's like having a mini MoMA here in town. And you also have the sculpture gallery, also filled with incredible 20th century sculpture and artworks.
When do you get to go into the Glass House itself, or is that allowed?
Yes, so we're allowed to go in, so that's really exciting. You go and we have a tour around inside and look at the Bauhaus furniture, which is all original, and that's also an incredible collection. And you also get to wander and look at the view, which it looks down at the pond pavilion. The glass house faces west, so when you're looking out, its perfect time is sunset time. It's absolutely stunning.
When I was growing up in New Canaan and I had friends visit me, I would take them to the glass house. But back then, Mr. Johnson was living there. So we would hop up and try to get a glimpse of it from the stone wall and have a quick view. But I was very fortunate to get a personal tour a few years ago, and it was amazing, really amazing.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was terrific. How is the tour working now during these difficult times? During the pandemic.
Now we had to pivot a bit. We put all our programming online, which has really had a great audience that actually expanded because we have a wider reach at this time. And as far as visiting, now we have grounds passes, which for the first time we're allowing visitors to drive to the site and then they can bring their kids of all ages, which is really a treat. We have a scavenger hunt, which is really fun for the kids, and they get a lollipop at the end. So I'm really happy that this has been more convenient for families. And we have a much better price point, so you can bring more members of your family. Kids are free under a certain age, so it's really, I think, a great way to spend an afternoon experiencing architecture and landscape, and you also get to see some of the outdoor sculptures on a landscape.
The Glass House is part of the National Trust of Historic Preservation, is that correct?
Yes, it's a National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is based in Washington. It's a nonprofit.
I know that the Tourism and Economic Development Group that has been established here in New Canaan really focuses on the Glass House as one of the many jewels. How has that been working alongside of the group called TDAC?
It's been really fantastic because we have now a group that has been so supportive, and also they've been connecting our efforts with other efforts in town. So we're doing a lot more collaboration with other arts organizations, and I feel like we have a lot more to offer. Doing press campaigns together and organizing full experience, and also we have the great expertise of that TDAC group.
We're here today because we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which gave the women the right to vote. When was the first time you voted? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. I remember when I first voted, and I remember feeling so much a part of this country. I felt like I was really a citizen, an active citizen, and I was so proud, and really gave me this feeling that I was being an active in this democracy. So it was very exciting, yes.
If you were living 100 years ago, do you think you would have been very active in going after this?
Yes, I would have. I just knowing there were different states that had allowed women to vote, and it was like then it was taken away, and it was quite complicated. So this whole movement, which took a long time and a lot of brave women, I know that I would have been there. I feel like it would have been very important to me to do it not only for myself but for my children and my daughters and future generations.
As we look at the work that was done with the 19th Amendment and where we are today and the recent passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was obviously a pioneer and a trailblazer in her own right, but we're still slowly coming along. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I feel that it's really important that for women to be actively involved in their communities. I think that is, again, if you can vote and you can be involved in what affects your life, that's really important. I know that sometimes when we're really busy doing other things, it's hard to know what those opportunities are. And I think that places like the Historical Society or the library can help direct you. That is the very first step. But other than that, for women in general, we definitely have a lot farther to go as far as equality. And for all Americans, actually, we're still in this experiment figuring it out. And which is why we need to do it for all of us and to carry on improving situation for all Americans.
What advice would you give a young person coming out of college now going into the business world?
I would give my advice is to be your authentic self, and to learn and place yourself somewhere where you're going to have some great training. That is really essential to learn all that you need to learn. I had a great training at Christie's in their graduate training program, which still I use a lot of what I learned today. It gives you great habits, and I think also for women working is to follow their instincts and know what is best for them. If it's something that doesn't feel right, they shouldn't do it. And they should try and see what their passions could be turned into an actual career. I also feel it's important to allow humor into your day and to say what you feel and not be afraid to speak out when it's necessary. That is important. There is absolutely nothing going to go wrong with that. It's important to share what you have in your mind and what you observe.
Do you have any mentors that you're working with today, or were there any early on in your career that you can tell me a little bit about?
Yes, I had, other than my grandmother, who really encouraged me and had a real, all my grandparents had a real focus on education with the expectation that something would come from it, which was kind of nice to have. I also had really a wonderful working relationship with Christy McLear, who then took me on to help her with the Rauschenberg Foundation.
And she was at the Glass House.
She was the inaugural director of the Glass House, and I thought that was really, we worked very well together. And then I have been working at the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I have been given a lot of wonderful opportunity, and there is Catherine Malone France, who's the chief preservation officer, who's been so incredibly supportive and has also encouraged me to do other projects within the organization. I'm now working on the Tidal Basin Ideas Lab, which is finding solutions for the tidal basin. And so I really appreciate her support and encouraging me through these years. I would also thank all our directors, Gregory Sages, who's always been a wonderful support. Right now, he's the executive director of the Glass House, and he's always allowed me to do what I need to do to be a mother and work full time. I would like to say that the National Trust for Historic Preservation has been incredibly supportive towards women working, allowing the flexibility that one needs to be able to rush home if there's a sick child, or attend a school play. I mean, that kind of flexibility has been really essential to being able to carry on my career.
What challenges are you facing these days with the Glass House? I know there's some buildings that need maybe some renovation. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges and what you're working on?
Yeah, so as life happens, and also the wear and tear of time, buildings do fall apart a bit, or they need some love and care. And so we do have the brick house, which has been closed since we opened as a museum, that we have our sights on to really fix and completely restore. It is part of the Glass House composition, and it's essential to the Glass House story to have that restored so that visitors will walk through the Glass House, which is so clear and transparent, and then walk into the brick house, which is actually almost an opposite experience. It's very cocoon-like, and each room has very rich tapestry, and one room has Fortuny silk, and it has a completely different experience. It's solid brick. So it's important that we restore that. We have a few other buildings that we need to restore. We have restored the sculpture gallery, which is now absolutely in pristine condition. So it's really great that we're able to take care of the site so that it's preserved for future generations.
A couple fun questions. What's your favorite tradition in New Canaan?
Oh, New Canaan has some amazing traditions. I'm just thinking right now of the caroling, which I love on Christmas Eve, which is such an incredible experience with the family to be outside, and there's all the fire outdoors. That's a beautiful tradition. I love the tradition of the Memorial Day. I think that's beautiful, where it ends up in the cemetery, and all the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts are involved. My children have been involved in that, and I thought it was very moving and a great way to engage the younger generations as well.
What is your favorite restaurant in New Canaan? Or maybe you have a few.
I have a few. It depends on what my mood is, but I love South End. I love Elm. Elm is fantastic. I love Soleil is another great one. I would say those three are my favorites.
And to wrap things up, tell me what gives you hope today?
Oh, well, I think there's so much energy, especially in America, in this country, having experienced living in many others. I would say that this is a really innovative country where Americans are not afraid to try new ideas. Failure is not a big deal in the sense that as long as you learn from it, it's actually a way of eliminating things and knowing what does work. So I feel that and also the sense of giving and the duty that one feels towards helping others, the volunteering, the charity work, the care and that goes on in this country is really strong, and you really don't see it in that much in the rest of the world. So I'm very impressed by that, and that I feel that everyone is trying really hard to do their best and ultimately find solutions. So we may have differences, but I think it's really important that everyone respects those and respects everyone's views and learns to work together.
Wonderful. Christa Carr, Communications Director of the Glass House and a woman leader in New Canaan. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.